Hey everyone, of course, welcome to the next edition of Forum Bites. I'm actually still here in Chicago, but I'm flying home later on tonight. So I'm going to be locked in a tin can for 24 hours. So I'm outside again, once again, trying to answer one of your questions. And the question today comes concerning conflict. And how do you have that conversation with someone you know you need to have, but clearly you don't want to have it? So the question on the table, of course, with today's video is about conflict and how you have that conversation that you know you should have, but you just don't want to have it because you believe that person may react badly. They may even be the leader of the group. You may be just part of a leadership group. And you want to know, how do I have those conversations? Now, I'm going to assume that you are part of a leadership group, a forum. You may be part of a forum, a moderator. You might be on a chapter board, regional board. You might be on a committee. You might be on a forum committee, membership committee. You might be the leader of that committee. You may even just be part of that committee. And you have a conflict within your group that's trying to work out how you have the conversation. Now, in Australia, we sometimes talk, or we say that conversations on conflict that no one wants to talk about is sometimes called a pink elephant. In other words, you have a group of people coming together to meet. There's a subject, there's something wrong, and there's a great big pink elephant, that subject, sitting in the corner of the room. Everyone knows it's there, but everyone doesn't want to talk about it. And that's something which can actually destroy a group, because a pink elephant takes up a lot of room. So obviously the first thing we have to do is I want to make sure I can define the conflict I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the physical type. As you know, physical conflict just isn't tolerated. It's a black and white answer. Done. This is a type of conflict where you may have a differing of opinion or differing of direction. You may have a leader taking a group down a path that an individual doesn't agree with. Or you may have a leader who have a whole group who disagrees with them and they have to have the conflict conversation with them. So when I'm talking about conflict, I'm talking about conflict of a disagreement, perhaps of opinion, or maybe even disagreement of an action, but certainly not a physical one. So the first thing you have to understand about conflict is sometimes when you're talking with people about actions is you have to sometimes agree to disagree. Because conflict can come in many different forms, from different actions, from different opinions, or even different perspectives, because they come from different parts of the planet. But since we're all part of leadership groups, it's really important that we all understand that it is our job to talk about conflict, to remove it. It is not just the leader's job, because the leader may actually be the person who's causing the conflict in the first place. If you're a part of a leadership group, if you're a part of a forum, it is your responsibility, and everyone else's, to talk about the pink elephant in the room. Because if you don't, it just continues to grow. And when it comes down to how you actually tackle it, there's a couple of steps that I've worked, in my experience, that I've seen when I've worked with both forums, regionals, I've worked with some chapter boards, and I've seen a couple of steps make it a little bit easier. But I'm the first to say that conflict, I will never stand here and say conflict is easy. Conflict is a catalyst for change, which it is. But conflict is never easy. No one ever goes out and starts a day feeling like I'm going to make someone feel bad today because it's a catalyst for change. It is never easy. But taking action is important because that type of conflict is the catalyst for making a change, hopefully for things for the better. But it's never easy. When it comes down to the first step, I find that defining what the actual conflict means to you is really important. But make sure that emotion is not in the driver's seat. Emotion has a place in the car. You need to be able to talk about how a situation is making you feel. You need to be able to talk about how the situation is making other people feel. But it cannot drive the conversation. Because when people only talk about emotion, usually the other person then starts talking about emotion, and then they just argue about who feels worse. And they actually aren't talking about the problem. You need to remain on task. You need to remain talking about the issue, not only about how it makes you feel. The next point you have to try and work out is the mirror effect. In other words, if you're holding a mirror up to that individual, why do you think that they're doing that type of behaviour? Is there a reason for it? Because it's really important for you to understand that reason before you have the conversation with the individual. I had a chat with a forum member who was actually having a moderator take them down a path they didn't want to go down. And they were scared to talk to that moderator to change path because they thought it was going to be just having a bad forum experience. And as soon as they actually did their homework, not on the moderator who was doing it, but on the possible reasons, they actually found out the reasons behind it, which therefore made the conflict not exist in the first place. The assumptions they had made without knowing the full story made conflict out of nothing. So when they actually had the conversation, it was just clarification of the why, not necessarily the what. So make sure you do the homework to try and work out why they may be doing this behaviour before you make the assumption yourself about why you think they are. The next question you have to ask before you have the conversation with the individual is you need to answer the question of why should I from their perspective. You're hopefully going to try and change behaviour. You're probably going to get to the end where you're going to agree to disagree. But you need to change behaviour because obviously the conflict is destroying whatever group you're part of. So being able to come up with the why should I answer from their perspective allows you to be able to come up with a conversation that will be productive. Now what it means is you need to think through in your own head why they should do what you're asking them to do, so you can frame the conversation around that. If it's only completely and utterly from your perspective and not from theirs, you'll find it difficult to be able to sell the idea of change. So knowing what they see, knowing their opinion before you go into the conversation is really important. And of course, the last part is having the conversation yourself. Some people do it one-on-one, some people do it in the group, some people do it in twos and threes. Please, whatever one you decide to do is the right one, but don't bring someone along like you bring along to your first date as a chaperone just in case you have to bail, because that comes off as the wrong thing. It comes off as a gang up, like 1 versus 2 and suddenly 2 people are attacking. Make sure you plan that out from the first couple of steps. If it's a one-on-one and you believe it's a problem only between you two, that now makes sense. If you believe it's a problem between you and someone else and another individual, maybe get a smaller group together. If you believe it's affecting the whole group, do that conversation within the whole group. It really depends on the situation. But the one thing that normally happens, or the one thing that is repetitive on everyone that I've tackled together with different groups, is once the conflict has been discussed, once the conflict has been remedied or some steps have been planned upon, it has to come back to the group. Because the last thing you want is the pink elephant has been spoken about, it's left, and another one has been invented because the conflict has been spoken about and the other group don't know what happened, but no one wants to talk about it. And yes, I've had that situation before. Now the one thing with conflict is it's never easy. As I said, I would never tell you that conflict is something which you should welcome with open arms, but it's something that you can use to your advantage. Conflict is never easy, but whether it is a positive outcome or a negative outcome because of that conflict is actually more up to you than the other individual. Because sometimes people who are causing a problem sometimes don't even know they're doing it. Now, as always, if anyone's got any questions whatsoever, please leave them in the comments section. If you haven't subscribed already, you know what to do. Just hit that subscribe button now. And as always, I'll see you in the next episode.